Hello and welcome back to the Rekt Capital channel. Welcome to today's video. I hope you're having a fantastic day today, at least a day that was better than yesterday. The past few 48 hours have been really anomalous. It's outlier price action at its core. It's a black swan event that we're seeing across the entire crypto market. Bitcoin has been heavily affected. It's had its worst price action in 7 years, and the daily drop for Ethereum it's been unprecedented. It pretty much has been unprecedented. And if we just look at the top 10 cryptocurrencies in the space, we are seeing a bit of relief rallying after a very strong exponential drop towards the downside. Historical sell-side pressure, momentum like we've never seen before, this cascading acceleratory liquidation sell-side volume that we've been seeing over the past 48 hours or so, that has led to a 53% drop in Bitcoin's price. Cole Peterson here said that we're fast approaching 1 billion in Bitcoin long position liquidations today, and that is unprecedented. The sell side action that we've been seeing in the past 48 hours or so has been unprecedented. Liquidation after liquidation, cascading, building on each other. And the scariest thing, something that really scared me, because I was actually watching the order book on Bitmex, what was going on, because there was a lot of cascading sell side pressure going on. And one of the scariest things that I've seen in a very long time, that we saw $20 million worth of buy-side pressure separating Bitcoin from its current price at the time of 3,800 and zero. That was really scary to see, that we had so little buy pressure on Bitmex separating Bitcoin from going to zero. It's just something that you can't anticipate. It was absolutely mind-blowing to see that, and to see this sell-side pressure just simply pressing on Bitcoin's price and just causing this cascading liquidation in many people. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal to see that. And of course, shortly after we saw these buy orders, a very thin order book in Bitmex, we saw a Bitmex outage. And I'm just very curious, and I posted a poll on my Twitter. Bitmex outages precede strong reversals in Bitcoin's price. In your experience, true or false? And so far, the majority is very much positive that this seems to be the case, because once we saw a Bitcoin outage, we saw tremendous volatility in the recent candle, and then we actually saw a real increase in Bitcoin's price action, at least on Coinbase. So that was from 3,800 to 5,500. So that was a massive increase on Coinbase, all the while Bitmex was pretty much not letting people log into their Bitmex accounts, and it just froze. There was an absolute outage. Nobody could access their funds on there, and many people on Twitter were just going ballistic in terms of, is this an exit scam? What's going on? You know, the sky is falling. If you see such price action to the downside, it can be very easy to be emotional about it. But here's where I'm going to be much less emotional. Here's where I'm going to offer my level-headed approach in terms of what we're seeing in Bitcoin's price action, at least on the weekly. And bear in mind, when we have a lot of periods, a long time of extreme volatility, it's very important to just say that technical analysis is very much out of the window when we see such outlier events in the price action, in the global economy, in public healthcare going on. All of these things are cascading, and even the PlusToken scam, which we'll be talking about in more detail later on. All of these things are cascading and compounding onto each other and really affecting Bitcoin's price. But what I can see from the Bitcoin price action here is, what if this is the ascending triangle? That was essentially the ranging period of what I thought was a bull trend. And of course, it was a bull trend, but it was a lower high in the grander scheme of things. But what if this ranging period, the ascending triangle, was a textbook price analysis sort of breakout strategy? So a breakout following the ascending triangle to these highs of around 11,000, or at least 14,000 were the highs, and then followed by a pullback number 2, which we're seeing right now, a retest attempt of the top of this ascending triangle, and then we'll see a trend continuation. These are very classical technical analysis breakout theory, breakout trading strategies, and this is the sort of strategies that I use in my trading altcoins, trading Bitcoin on a daily basis. But if we zoom out, we can pretty much try to apply this on a macro scale as well. And so far, it seems to be the case that 4,150 is that new support, because previously it was a resistance. But in fact, if we zoom in here, we never really got that successful retest. We got it in the form of a wick on the daily chart, but we never got that on the weekly. So it's very interesting to see that we're only getting that successful retest right now. And the thing is, can Bitcoin continue to uphold itself above 4,150? Because if it can, then this theory, this typical classical technical analysis breakout theory would be very much on the cards, and so far it seems to be plausible. But the most important thing is that we are in extreme fear territory. And even though Bitcoin has recorded one of its worst days in its history, in its entire Bitcoin history, the Fear and Greed Index is telling us that the Fear and Greed Index has essentially seen this before. So nothing out of the ordinary for the Fear and Greed Index, but we have to also bear in mind and be critical about this and objective that the Fear and Greed Index is blind to whatever's going on with the coronavirus, whatever is going on with the global economy and the recessions, the increasing pressure on public healthcare, and how this is all contributing to fear as well as the PlusToken scam. So all of these catalysts, the Fear and Greed Index is quite blind to that. But having said that, we tend to see reversals in Bitcoin's price every time Bitcoin, or at least the Fear and Greed Index, reaches extreme fear territory. So we are in extreme fear territory. It is 10. We've seen the lowest number be 5. So 5 was around September. And of course, the last time we saw the Fear and Greed Index visit extreme fear levels was when Bitcoin bottomed at 6,500 before rallying 61% to 10.5k. Extreme fear does precede financial opportunity, but the question is, in extreme conditions like we've never ever seen before in crypto, does the Fear and Greed really apply? That's something that we need to consider. But all in all, very interesting to see that the Fear and Greed Index has seen this sort of level of fear before, even though we've seen unprecedented price action. But in any case, here is my technical analysis on Bitcoin on the weekly chart. I showed you guys the technical price analysis here of what we're seeing, but I wanted to also showcase to you guys that even though we broke down from the logarithmic trend line, which I was speaking about most recently right over here. This was the logarithmic trend line, which is really bad news in terms of what we can expect for Bitcoin going forward. But if we turn off the log scale, we can have a look here that on the normal price action, we actually are respecting this trend line right over here. Even though there was a dip below here, that cascading sell-side pressure, above all else, we still saw support around here. But most importantly, we had the 200 weekly EMA, the 200 weekly exponential moving average, hold price at around 5,500, which is where Coinbase returned to. The Bitcoin Coinbase price was 5,500 after the Bitmex outage. So that's where Coinbase actually returned to, so just right above the 200 EMA. And the 200 EMA on the weekly chart is a very important long-term gauge of investor sentiment for Bitcoin holders. At the moment, we're still seeing that people are bullish on Bitcoin, but every time we see a dip below this 200 EMA, and we haven't seen many of those at all, those tend to be good financial opportunities, and we're seeing this to be the case as well. So even though the logarithmic scale, the logarithmic trend line has been broken, we are seeing another trend line and the 200 weekly EMA they're actually showing some confluent support. And I just want to talk about this briefly, because before, when I was analyzing the intra ascending triangle price action in Bitcoin, I was saying that we won't remember this sort of price action. We won't remember that we were fearful here when Bitcoin appreciates towards the upside. And I just want to elaborate on that statement because, true, if we see price tendencies become respected over time and it's a recurring tendency prior to each and every halving, then of course this is very normal price action. But what we're seeing here is not normal price action. This isn't normal price action, and it's this sort of outlier price action that we remember. So we do assign a descriptive meaning to this price action, much like people remember Mt. Gox in 2014. So this bear market that ensued ever since we actually saw that crash with Mt. Gox. So it's those sort of tremendous changes in the market on a pretty much global scale, whether that's concerning crypto, because Mt. Gox was pretty much one of the main exchanges at the time, that had an impact on crypto significantly. And now we're seeing a huge impact on crypto. And this actually concerns the global economy as well, with the coronavirus and whatnot happening as well. So we are seeing so many factors influence Bitcoin's price action to the point that this is really outlier price action. And this will go down in history. History is being written right now, whether we like it or not. And we might not see this again in the future. But after all, this is crypto. So we probably will see something crazy like this in the future, but at the moment that's a story for another time, because at the moment right now history is being written as we speak. And it's interesting to see that many people would have actually preferred a bear market rather than a 40% decrease, which actually turned into a 50% decrease in Bitcoin's price action in 24 hours. People would have preferred this drop to have occurred over a longer period of time rather than all at once, and that's quite a sizable majority here. And that's just a fun fact, because we've seen a lot of volatility in the crypto market and people don't react well to volatility. It's this cascading extreme fear that's really affecting the Bitcoin price action. And as you guys can see, one of the most important reasons for this recent dump in Bitcoin's price action is the fact that we have seen an increase, an exponential increase in coronavirus mentions. And that is something that is very powerful to say, because this insight has been something we've been speaking about on the channel. This just essentially shows to us that every time we see an increase in total mentions for the coronavirus, Bitcoin's price action goes to the downside. And with an exponential increase in mentions for the virus, we've seen an exponential decrease in Bitcoin's price action. So this inverse relationship is continuing. It's going to be a correlation for a while, but there will be a point where this won't be a lasting correlation and we'll see some decorrelation over time once the global situation becomes a little bit more stabilized. But the best way to read this is essentially an increase in mentions in the coronavirus is an increase in global uncertainty. And uncertainty on a physiological level registers as pain in the brain, and most people don't want that pain. So they don't want more uncertainty, so they'll probably cash out of their high risk assets like Bitcoin, which is why we saw a lot of liquidations. Lots of people, even long-term hodlers, they started to panic sell a bit, and that's where things really get extreme. That's why we see a lot of strong sell side action. So if we see an increase in uncertainty, people don't want to hold a uncertain asset with all of its volatility. And even though the coronavirus is impacting Bitcoin's price action hugely, it's also impacting the global economy, obviously, but also the public healthcare. So there's a tremendous pressure on the public healthcare. So if we just look at Italy very briefly, this is from the Financial Times. Italy had 12.5 critical care beds per 100,000 people. And Italy is struggling right now because they have one of the most severe situations when it comes to the coronavirus. And in fact, the UK is resembling the growth rates of the virus that Italy had 2 weeks ago. And in fact, the UK has 6.6 critical care beds per 100,000 people, which is 50% less than Italy. So if Italy is struggling right now with the healthcare system, with their critical care infrastructure, the UK, who has and is showing exponential growth in the amount of coronavirus patients and numbers of infections that are being confirmed, it's something to be concerned about, truly, because after all, if we just look at the European average for these critical care infrastructure, then really, if we just extrapolate this, then to be honest, right all the way here, It only starts with the Czech Republic, who are slightly above average, the European average for these critical care beds. So in fact, most of Europe is underprepared for the coronavirus. The public health care is underprepared, which is why it's so important to take appropriate measures of trying to stop the spread of this coronavirus. So the coronavirus is a negative catalyst for Bitcoin's price action and in the global economy. And as we know, the traditional markets are correlated to Bitcoin's price action. Bitcoin is falling in tandem with equities as well, and the traditional markets overall, the energy sector and whatnot. So overall, we're just seeing a lot of sell side action from investors who are just cashing out and just trying to prepare for this global pandemic that is COVID-19. But another factor that comes into play with the coronavirus and its effect on Bitcoin's price, with the liquidations that we've been seeing build on top of each other and cascading during this downtrend, the other thing is to mention the PlusToken scam, the crypto ponzi scheme. And I'm going to delve deep into this analysis by Titan Inc. We can see that if we just look at on-chain volume from PlusToken versus Bitcoin price listed on Huobi, you can see that even though PlusToken was shut down by law enforcement in mid-2019, there was still a lot of holdings in terms of Bitcoin that the PlusToken team had. So a major cash out occurred around September 23rd, and you can actually see that this major cash out coincided with a decrease, an exponential decrease and downward price pressure for Bitcoin right over here. So very interesting to see how this PlusToken scan and sell-off is truly impacting the price action, because there was a lot of Bitcoin in that scam, in that crypto Ponzi scheme, one of the greatest crypto Ponzi schemes of all time in crypto. So it has an adverse effect every time we see a major cash out of around 34 million right over here. So it does impact Bitcoin's price action, and this is one of the reasons and negative catalysts that coincide with the liquidations, that coincide with the coronavirus. It all builds on top of each other, causing a massive downtrend like we've never seen before. And you can see here that once we saw that breakdown in price, where price dropped so significantly because of that major cash out, we actually saw an increase in volatility, whereby we just saw a lot of coins exchange hands. This was a considerable volatile peak in terms of volatility. If you just look at all the volatile peaks right over here, this peak and this peak, a considerable volatile peak right over here, which just coincides with that major sell-off. So obviously the volatility will occur after the sell-off, but we also have to bear in mind that there was an increase in volume picking up before we saw that price drop. And afterwards, of course, once we saw the price drop, an increase in volatility, then we actually saw volume subside, because all of this was being absorbed by the market. And there was a huge increase in volume for Bitcoin to tether trades prior to the breakdown. So make of that what you will. In any case, we are seeing that there are a lot of signs pointing to the fact that this PlusToken scam has had an adverse effect on Bitcoin's price action. And it's this sort of thing that coincides, once it coincides with a coronavirus outbreak and how that affects Bitcoin's price and the global economy in total as well, and also the cascading liquidations on Bitmex and other derivative platforms, that just makes up for a recipe for disaster and one of the most extreme drops in Bitcoin's price history. But one of the most intriguing things here is that, yes, Bitcoin has totally invalidated its pre-halving price tendencies. It's gone against the grain of history, and it's totally understandable that if a black swan event, like all these different things gelling together, occur, then we're going to see this sort of outlier price action. There's no doubt about it. And of course, major altcoins in their USD pairings have been adversely impacted by this as well, but we have to bear in mind that the majors in their BTC pairs have been holding up relatively well, and one of those examples is actually Ethereum BTC. So this is a chart that I posted on February 6th, where we tend to see a breakout, and I'm actually going to zoom this in right over here. We tend to see a breakout past its 200 daily exponential moving average. It tends to rally around 21% towards the upside before once again reaching and retracing, reaching the 200 daily exponential moving average before actually continuing towards the upside. And of course, Bitcoin invalidated its historical price tendencies, but Ethereum BTC actually, even though it overextended itself 10% towards the upside, it's still following on its historical price tendencies with frightening precision. So this fractal is still very much in play, which actually showcases quite some strength in the altcoin market when it comes to BTC pairs. And this is a very curious case because we're seeing that the historical tendencies are very much in alignment. So when the 200 daily exponential moving average for Ethereum BTC was breached, over here we saw a pullback. As you guys can see, if we there's the successful retest of the 200 EMA as a support before we saw an exponential movement towards the upside. We're seeing a lot of that happen right over here. Granted, this retrace was an extended sell-off, but we are actually seeing that this is holding as a support. So far, so good. So it is a very, very curious case here, but we're seeing this on a lot of major altcoins that matter when it comes to altcoin directional bias. So Dogecoin, if you haven't seen my video about Dogecoin and how it can predict altcoin seasons and increases in altcoins across the board, check that out in the right top hand corner, because Dogecoin is holding its market structure very, very well. And in fact, it tends to predict alt seasons, whether that's predicting them ahead of time or just confirming a continuation for altcoin BTC pairs. And the fact that Dogecoin is holding up so well, and in fact, it is decorrelated from the crypto market. It's actually rallied 26% recently towards the top of this ascending triangle. The fact that we're seeing this sort of strength in Ethereum BTC right now, in Dogecoin BTC, and even Litecoin BTC as well, the fact that we're seeing this sort of stability in altcoin BTC pairs is an interesting observation, and it could be a sign of things to come in the coming weeks for altcoins, for them to potentially outperform a very cheap Bitcoin. But until then, let's see how things resolve, because it is a very volatile time in the market. Let's see if Bitcoin can establish some stability at these current price levels. We've seen an incredible drop in its price action most recently, so it's just very important to see if it can hold the 200 daily, 200 weekly EMA, if it can continue to respect this trend line, and if it can also play into the historical, or at least the price action that we're seeing here, this sort of successful retest. It's all about stability at this point, but there is no question that we're probably going to see some more volatility. This isn't the end of this sort of capitulation. It's very important to just see stability, some sort of accumulation period, arranging period. Something like this would be great at around these levels over the coming weeks. This isn't going to be over anytime soon, so it's very important to keep a level-headed approach during these times of extreme fear, and I'm going to be there for you guys to support you during this very volatile, very hectic, and very extreme time. And that being said, that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found value in this video, and of course, if you did, please consider dropping a like, and of course, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I'm more than happy to be pumping out this content on a daily basis, so feel free to drop a like, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I'm Rekt Capital. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak soon.